Welcome. My name is Dean Jones. I'm the Group Information Technology Manager from KFC. I've been working at KFC for the last 7 years, and I'm going to take you through today our trip through to the cloud with Snowflake. So firstly, let me talk a little bit about KFC. Everybody knows who this guy is, Colonel Sanders himself, once voted the second most recognizable person in the world. He, back in 1930, started selling chicken from a service station, and so KFC started. Through the years, they've been acquired by Yum Brands, who also own Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. And between them, we've got 50,000 Yum restaurants across 150 different countries around the world. So it's become quite an empire. And the Yum Brands themselves have just acquired another restaurant brand called the Habit Burger Grill. KFC in Australia. KFC arrived back in 1968, over 50 years ago, and they're now the second largest brand in the fast food industry in Australia. And they capture about 9% of the $20 billion annual industry. So we're doing all right. They've got about 683 restaurants in Australia, 50 of which we own as equity, and the others are all owned by franchisees, shared between 55 different franchisees. And they vary in size from major corporations to which own about over 200 restaurants, to some smaller ma and pa size franchisees that own one or two. We employ within that set of stores, we employ over 34,000 employees, either directly or through the franchise chain, and we serve over 2 million customers each week. The majority of our revenue as KFC corporate comes from the royalties that we collect from each of the purchases that go through the franchise restaurant chain. Okay, so that's KFC as a whole. Talking about the data side of things, and I guess where we start our journey towards Snowflake. If we go back to 2018, we basically started with a pretty standard, setup, configuration even. We had been doing projects out in the data space for we sort of started in 2012. And between 2012 and 2018, we'd rolled out bringing multiple different data sources into our on-premise SQL Server data warehouse. We're running SQL Server 2008 R2 and 2014. We'd acquired 130 different data sources that we'd pull through either from flat files or from different business apps. When we were we're running about 6,000 jobs a week. 6,000 different loads that we had running over a week. And we pushed that through, and we created about 120 odd models. So we're running this all on one very big SQL Server, which surprised me that it managed to do all that. But it was sort of coping with each of our daily loads, and the fact that we were running our reporting off that same server as well. It meant that we had to process everything up to a certain point in the morning, and from that point on, as the reports went out, we needed to remove all the report processing, all the data processing, and just allow the business to be able to run the reports. So if anything slipped and we pushed our loads back too far into the day, our customers would be complaining that they weren't able to run their report to the business users. We had about 5,000 different reports that we were sharing out to a mix of our franchisees and our corporate staff. We had about 100 corporate users, and the rest were franchisees. And we also did this process that we had with the data warehouse, we also added, extended on that, and we started using that data to push into other enterprise systems as well. So as we ingested the data through and pushed it through the processes, we would also push it out into different corporate apps like the workforce management solution and other tools, solutions like that. So we're sort of a cross between a data warehouse and an integration solution. We sort of started this with, we managed this with a very lean team. We had basically a data warehouse developer who started with us back in 2018. He's a great guy, a very passionate individual who loves data and loves and amazing customer service. But when he came on board, we sort of had an opportunity to extend out and look at things slightly differently. So yeah, but initially it was just him on board with some help of a small team of consultants that we would bring in occasionally to do things. But it was, yeah, we're managing this all with one full-time resource. At that point, we sort of hit a bit of a crossroads. We're not exactly sure what came first, whether it was the request from the business or the problem, or if the request raised the problem. But anyway, the business came to us and they said, we've been bringing on all these new channels, all these new ordering channels. We've got delivery, we've got the app, we've got web ordering, we've got, you know, people still coming in through the drive-through or through the front counter, and we want to be able to break our sales down and look at growth down to each of those different channels. This was it's not a small feat in that we'd only ever looked at same-store sales on a day-by-day basis previously. So with that in mind, it was going to be, you know, we knew that we were going to have to go back through and do a massive reprocessing of a lot of data to get these metrics generated and pushed out to the stores and to the business every day. So with our SQL stack and with our one SQL server, we knew we were going to have a few issues, but once we tried, we sort of really started to see the limitations of our current environment. With this year-on-year report by channel, we needed to reprocess about 7 billion records from our sales history, but we needed to do that within the periods that we had of processing, so not to impact everyone's reporting. Also, to try and make sure that the data would be available within a reasonable amount of time. So when we first tried that, we started writing queries and things just weren't coming back. It was just timing out. We tried to physicalize with just 2 years worth of data, and the tables took like 8 hours to try and process in SQL. So it was just getting, we were just hitting roadblocks after roadblock. We basically didn't have enough hours on the server to process the data for it to be used without us hitting some sort of wall. So yeah, we basically were at that point where we started considering, what are our options? How can we get around this problem? And it's around then we've got a bit of a saying at KFC. We say bucket, and this was definitely one of those bucket scenarios. We knew that that we were going to have to do something. We'd been told that it was going to be a massive project by some different individuals that we'd spoken to, and we've talked about, well, we need to do something bigger. We need to use a solution that's cloud-based to get out and to open up the data for the business. But we'd always been told it was going to be hard and it's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time. And we knew, like, from some experience that we'd had with SQL Server, we'd been using SQL Server VMs in the cloud to share data with our data scientists and some of our agencies prior. We knew it worked, but it was expensive, and there was a lot of unutilized time that you would be paying for on those servers. We didn't have any AWS skills internally, so we really didn't know a lot about that. But we knew we needed to try something. And it was at that time that we sort of connected with Snowflake, and we, I think we connected with one of the pre-sales guys there who came in and sort of started to tell us what it could do. And then we started an engagement, and we did what everyone else does. So we decided, let's do a proof of concept. So this is around the beginning of 2019, I think. And we thought we'd just go proof of concept with the one issue that we had, that we knew we couldn't resolve in our current environment. We didn't really have any budget for a project of scale, so it needed to be a cheap solution that was manageable, and it wasn't going to give us an ongoing cost that we couldn't pay for. So this piece of work that we're looking around sales was a perfect opportunity. We had the data sitting in a AWS Redshift database, which was our sort of replication of our transactional database that we use for storing the sales data in. And we started to go about the process of pulling that data out and pushing it into Snowflake so we could see if we could get the metrics that the business were after, if we could generate those KPIs. So we decided we'll load all the data back until 2012 that we had, so we'd be able to put it through its paces and generate the data historically. There was the process to get the data out was a feat in itself, because it took us 18 hours to extract the data out and to create CSV files so that we could push the data into Snowflake. Once in the process of pulling all that data out, and that 18 hours, and we were expecting something similar to load the data into Snowflake. Once we started the process, the team came back to me after 10 minutes and said the data's all been loaded. It only took 7 minutes to get all the data up into the solution, so we were pretty impressed with that as a starting point. But then when we started running our SQL queries, it had timed out on our old database, which was an old database. It was pretty grungy though, still a SQL database. The same process that we were trying to move across without touching the SQL took us 20 minutes to run. So that was without optimizing, basically running this exact same SQL that we'd run previously. And this is, I guess, just because of Snowflake's design and the fact that we're moving from on-premise to cloud. So, just in saying that, we started to get very excited and started to think of, well, what else can we do? How can we really get this to add benefit? So what we then gave access to our business users to the solution. So using something simple, just some simple Power BI dashboards, we pointed at Snowflake and allowed our key users who had been waiting for this data for quite some time to just start querying the database, hitting it, pulling the data out, and just being able to get the answers that they'd been really dependent on us supplying for them in Excel dumps before, because the data set was too large. And they just got they loved it. They went a bit Snowflake crazy. Well, initially it was Power BI crazy, because they thought it was Power BI that was doing all the magic. But then once we started telling them that it was because of the database, they started to love the word Snowflake as well. There was a really good solution for us to test on. It was something we couldn't do. It was concise. We were able to update the data when at periods when we needed to, and we got a lot of learnings out of it. So I guess the big thing that we learned was a POC was a good way for us to learn that the cloud had a lot of offerings that we could utilize, and it was also a good way for us to the option of moving with the POC and going to Snowflake meant that we didn't actually need to stop or processing any of the data or impact any of the processes that we have running in the existing data warehouse. So the legacy data warehouse was able to sit there and run alongside and still deploy all the legacy reporting. The other thing that we picked up was time travel. It's amazing at fixing a lot of mistakes when you are going through your initial stages of trialing data, and if you delete something, you can just go back and pull it back out using that process. It saved our it saved our developers a heap of time in multiple points throughout the POC. We also learned that the data lake was really powerful in that some of the later points to the POC, we started connecting to some of the APIs, and instead of having to convert the data as part of the ETL, we just dropped it into the data lake and were able to query it. So that was another big learning that we continue to use throughout our implementation. The tool Snowflake tool is great, but one of the other things that is really good around the solution is the support that was provided at all the points, both pre-sale and once we started move to full customer. The support team's been really good at helping us understand how to use the solution better or get around any issues that we do face. And the performance, I sort of touched on this before. It's really hard to get your head around when you think of the way we've had to deal with work, with loading and time frames and etc. In our on-prem environment. The way the solution ingests and the queries you can run are it's sort of unbelievable. So we have a process which used to take us something like 4 hours to push through some information into our in customer engagement tool. Using Snowflake, we can pull and push that data through in about 2 minutes. So those sort of savings just give you so much more opportunities to actually add value and to start to utilize the data in more creative ways. The other thing that we did really find out in this whole process as part of the POC and as part of the initial sets of data that we put through Snowflake, and this is something that's really valuable that I've learned, is when you start talking about data and you're talking about marketing data, you need to deal with marketing people, and they're very special, but they're very valuable people as well for your data exploits and for getting your data solutions into embedded into the business, because they started to see some of the value in as we started to give them the ability to see channel data and see transactions at that level and compare over year on year and day on day sales down at those granular levels. They started to get really excited, and they started to tell us how we could use Snowflake, which was always very interesting. But they also started to come up with words like datalicious, which is not something that I would think of, but it sort of sticks, and it's sort of how we've started to reference the whole way that KFC is starting to think about data, and how we're sort of incorporating data into more and more areas, and really because of the way that we've started to push information into data into Snowflake and make it become more valuable information. So we sort of gotten through the POC, we've started to get some really good traction within the business, and then we started to think, well, what else can we do with Snowflake? And one of the things that turned out to be a massive benefit, and it sort of extends on the ability of having to run your legacy solutions while you're still sort of transitioning to the cloud, is we set up a linked server in our prod SQL Server environment, which allowed us to query Snowflake and utilize Snowflake to push data directly into our SQL Server. This meant that things that were would take us massive amounts of time doing on-prem, where we needed the data to be there, we're able to push that query off into Snowflake and still get the data back to still service the existing reports or integration, but not have to deal with the 8-10 hours it used to take us to run that. So as we started to switch this over, it also meant that we got more capacity on the server, which freed it up and meant that people could actually run reports more frequently. So it sort of was a alleviation of a lot of the backlog that we had on the server. we enable this for our sales channel reporting that I mentioned previously, but we also started looking at this for some of our granular operational and audit reporter, which we got into a point where we once again weren't able to complete that within our job window, so our processing window. So having that been run in Snowflake just allowed it to come back and be provided when the business needed. So it made a massive difference. The other thing that we really made a huge impact for us was data sharing. We'd been sending data out to different Azure VMs to share with a whole lot of different organizations that we needed to pass data through to. So marketing agencies, data scientists, suppliers, and franchisees were the key ones that we were using initially. This was painful in that you were basically copying data out into these different databases, and then they would be able to access it from there. And it was a lot of duplication, a lot of pushing data in, to the cloud from on-prem. With Snowflake, once we set up the first share and we saw the benefits of that, we very quickly tried to move switch all those SQL VMs off and just move everybody onto that Snowflake share configuration. So we now have, like I said, franchisees, but we've got the global team, the global YUM team who are looking at our data. We've given them a share. And it just makes things so much easier because they're looking at the same data. When it's loaded into Snowflake, it's there for everybody. It reduces the overhead. And it actually, we're finding that these people that we're sharing it with, or the organizations we're sharing it with, are seeing the benefits in that they're getting the data faster and able to utilize it quicker and it's more real time. And the next thing we did was we pointed our MicroStrategy on-premise solution at Snowflake, and we started to see the benefits of that as well. So all these sort of benefits started to be realized through the new environment that we'd set up. We then started thinking about what's next, and started to move further and work more with the marketing guys around what else we could do within Snowflake. At this point, we enabled the business to see the benefits in data and what we could do with our environment. So we actually got buy-in to put in 2 more people into the team, which is obviously a major benefit. It meant that we were able to promote the data warehouse developer that we had to the data architect role, which was really to show the support that he'd for all the effort he'd done in helping us configure and get Snowflake up and running. And then we're able to get a data developer and a junior data scientist to work alongside and work within his team and get more and more benefits out of the data. And then at the end of 2019, we looked at, the next big thing, which was our CDP, our customer data platform implementation. And when we started looking at and customer data platform, we obviously started thinking about the massive amounts of data we were going to get and how we were going to utilize that. And when we were looking out through the different providers, one of the things that popped up was the fact that mParticle, our CDP, had a native Snowflake feed that we could just switch on. So obviously, when we saw that, it sort of was our preference to go to someone who could just switch on the ability for data to be in our Snowflake instance, and then we could use it for integration from that point. It made that whole process so much easier. Instead of having to build ETLs and start the whole negotiation with the vendor or hit an API or however you're going to get the data in, it was just switch on the feed. It was in our Snowflake environment and available for use. So that was, a massive benefit. We then started to look at what we could do with that data, and we started to extend out on our customer profiling data set, which, if we were running that on-prem, whenever we would create customer profiles or run the query over our customer universe, it'd take 3-4 hours to work. to come out and to create all those, update all those profiles. In Snowflake, it was taking the most 20 minutes, and we were able to be more granular and look at more elements for actually profiling our customers. We're also able to augment the CDP data. The data it was getting feeds from our app and from websites, etc. We were able to augment it with other data sources that we had in Snowflake and push that back into the CDP, and to create more, a more robust and enriched version of the customer that we're able to build segmentation of. This is continuing on as we add more, integrate more elements into the CDP. The data, say for GTM or Firebase or branch, all just flows straight into Snowflake and is there and available for us to once again segment more. So this has been a massive benefit, where we've reduced processing times that we used to have before, and the quality of the data and the solution is just light years ahead of where it had been before. So what we're doing at the moment, right now, we're extending out even further. We're moving all of our reporting to point directly at Snowflake and migrating it from our on-premise SQL service, which means reports are lightning fast for the business, which they are amazed with. We're actually at a point where the business are now starting to come to us and starting to get the taste for the data-licious data, and they're actually driving us further to get more and more data and get that back to them. So that's great, and they're actually coming to us with budgets, which is also great. So that's now we're sort of just need to manage the backlog, and we're more constrained by our resources than anything else. And down the track, what we have in line, we have a project kicking off, which is going to be around Internet of Things and sensors. Being able to monitor the temp in the stores, in the cool room, cookers, garbage sensors. So pretty much anything is available to be captured. We need to have somewhere to house all that data, and so the data lake is going to be the ideal place for us to push that to. And it's going to save us on having to look at a sensor solution that's going to provide us a point to house all that data. So that's the next piece that'll get pushed in. Our data scientists are really keen to get their hands on all this information, but it's also going to be able to be used for sort of ad hoc analysis, operational reporting, and the integration back into trigger alerts to our stores and to our restaurant general managers to let them know that your garbage bins hasn't been emptied in the last 4 hours or things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities there, a lot more data coming down the line. I think we're hitting like 30 terabytes now, which has gone from the 10 which we had on site, but we're just finding more and more use and more data that we want to be able to report on. So that sort of sums it up, but I need to show you this slide because there's no real reason. It's just to make you a bit hungry. But it sort of sums up where our data is and why the marketing guys are calling it data-licious. So thank you, and hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. Thanks.